Hey guys, this is Ted. I'll be your resident Nerdarchist for the day. First off, I want to go in and talk about my, nerd or gaming credentials. I've been with the this group for around 17 years. That's my first correction for you there, Dave. We started gaming when I was around 18. I'm now 35. I've been a card flopper, dice chucker. I've been in numerous LARPs. I've ran a LARP for approximately 5 years. I do the video games, the board games, all kinds of different CCGs and variety of tabletopping. So I've got quite a lot under my belt. So hopefully you'll think that my words are worth hearing. So today I wanted to talk about heavy-handed DMing and how much it can really change the scope or the feel of a game. We've probably all, at least those of you who have actually done tabletop, have been in a game that the DM just doesn't have, doesn't allow the players any real sway or change in what happens in the story. A DM will go out and they'll write their material, and regardless of what the players want to do, this is what's there. And that's one of the reasons why I've never really been fond of modules, because you kind of have to go by script. So I've had games and I've heard stories where players go in and the first time that they try and go off topic, the DM just throws something in the way so that they can't do that. A friend of mine told me a story once where they're playing a game, and anytime they would sit down and try and do role-playing, some government official would come in and demand that they leave or demand that they do something. Or combat would just happen out of nowhere. No perception checks, no spot checks, nothing to see. Oh, did they sneak up on us? No, it's just you're now in the middle of combat, and any role-playing is now done. So you really tend to not like those kind of games, because you really don't have a say in what you're doing. You don't have any real control. Imagine if, in your real life, you decide, I want to go have, this meal, and that just isn't a possibility. You're having chicken regardless of what you wanted. And that's kind of the way characters will feel when they get into, this type of game. Dave and some of my other, DMs in the past have done, this kind of thing, and it's like, you want your character to be alive. You want to breathe life into it. Another thing I wanted to, go into was to kind of correct some of Dave's mistakes or lack of details in the actual stories that he's already, presented you guys. In his first game, he told you, we did an evil campaign, and he made mention of a character's death, because characters do die. So in this game, we had a half-orc fighter. He was a, big badass with a two-handed sword, and, liked to beat stuff up. We had our drow necromancer, who, he had your typical, Raceland-esque kind of situation, desired for strong power, but was frail as heck. At 7th level, the dude had 15 hit points. It was a AD&D campaign, 2nd edition, so you really, you really struggled for those levels, and God forbid you actually get hit in combat and you're done. We had myself, who was the Dark Dwarven Psionicist, and we had a Minotaur Barbarian. Now, my character, he was a little bit interesting in combat, because he had racial powers and he had his psionic powers. And when combat started, if it was just the slightest bit, challenging or looked to be challenging, he'd use his power and poof, he'd disappear. And the first time it happened, the characters were a little like, well, where the hell did the dwarf go? And he wouldn't appear for another couple rounds, because the next round he'd use his next racial power of giant growth. And then the following round, meanwhile he's still getting into position to, while he wasn't a thief, but he could still surprise the heck out of somebody, he'd use his animal affinity. Now, the Dark Dwarves, they're kind of evil, and, he came from a place where, they really liked poison type stuff. So his animal affinity was a scorpion. And even though this campaign happened 17 years ago, this character was memorable enough that I can still actually remember, the actual, damage dice of the attacks in question. So when he did animal affinity, he got claws that did a D10 and a tail that did a D4. And then, when he wound up using his giant growth, those dice were just doubled. So on that third round of, technically on that fourth round of combat, when, he became visible and did a sneak attack on somebody, he was typically going to get the surprise round bonus, and he was attacking from behind, so he got like the +4 to hit, plus his normal stuff. So he was hitting, 2 die 10, 2 die 10, 2 die 4. So typically, whatever, again, we're talking like a 5th, 6th, 7th level campaign here. Typically, when he unloaded all of that stuff, whatever he hit just was gone. But as in Dave's story, we're traveling through this ravine, and the thing he failed to mention was that 3 days prior we had an encounter where the party was severely beat up, most of all the Minotaur. Now, I can't tell you how old, the Minotaur, player was at that point in time, but he didn't have a lot of gaming experience, and we had a DM that was out for blood. So, you weren't going to have the nicety of, hey, you're resting for the night, or you're doing any kind of healing. It was just you got your level and hit points back for resting for 8 hours. So the Minotaur, who was nearly dead at the beginning of the last encounter, had 3 days of rest. Should have been more than enough time to have him at full. But as this, 6th, 7th level barbarian, he had hit points into the 70s, no problem. Lots of constitution, lots of, heavy hit dice, rolled well. So he's thinking that, he's back to mighty indeed, because he didn't have anything to fight yet today. So we get into this combat, and they surprise us. We got archers and goblins with slings up in the ravine above us, and we see pretty much already at a charge are goblins on wargs, wearing heavy plate mail, wielding heavy war lances, which automatically are going to do a crit or do a double damage when they hit. And then if they crit, now you're talking about triple damage. So the Minotaur does what he always does: charge! And he brings out his mighty axes, and he's going to go cleave these goblins in half. And come on, he's a Minotaur; they're goblins. He really should just be able to cleave them. Until he fails, initiative, and they beat him. So these 3 lances just go into his midsection, and poof! DM's like, okay, well, that's 1 hit, that's 2 hit, ooh, that one's a crit. And he picks up all these dice, and boom! We're not talking about, some mighty wizard's fireball, but those dice hitting the table were, they still sounded pretty hard. And he tabulates damage, and whatever's like, alright, Ryan, you take 46 points of damage. And he looks at his hit points, and he realizes where he is in the initiative order, and he knows that he's next. So he's like, alright, I attack the one in the middle. And DM's like, you don't understand. You're dead. You're at -10. It's like, no, man, I got 76 hit points. I'm fine. It's like, you were at -35 at the start of the encounter. But, man, we didn't fight anything today. It went back and forth, and there was nothing to it. He was done. So he didn't quite understand that you need to pay attention to your hit points, and player mistakes that they can honestly cost you your character's life, and whatever else. But it can happen. So there's correction number 2 for you, Dave. So back onto heavy-handed DMing, and back to Ryan. He's actually running this game, and we start off with these characters. Dave had his ugly ass human with orc blood, and we've got this barbarian druid who's pretty much a loner fighting with his gigantic club, and we got a couple other odds and end characters. But Ryan starts off, and we had a really great beginning. We had this, it was around Christmas time when we started running this game, and Ryan put some thought into his material, and we're deciding we're gonna do this campaign that we're saving Christmas. You've all seen the movies and this and that do this knockoff of saving Christmas, but Ryan actually put it into a D&D game. It was cute, and it was great for a first level game. So after that, he really showed his control factor as a DM, and it really showed how much work he puts into the game, and what he actually wants to do with his game. So the longer that we're playing, the more it's obvious that we've got this story, and there is no getting out of it. There was a time we go into and we conquer this area that we turn into a stronghold, and we're 7th, 8th level at this point in time, and we got our own stronghold. We're feeling mighty indeed, and at this point in time, we're really interested in putting together an army and raising this stronghold to great heights, and really doing what we want. And we keep telling, out of game, the DM, hey, this is my goal, this is his goal, let's do this, let's do that. And it doesn't happen. He says, well, this is what's going on. And he forces us, down this path. So somehow we leave our stronghold, and we go out into the desert. And I can't recall exactly how we just fell into this hole, but we drop down in, and we meet this Gorgon looking creature, who obviously is potent with magic, and he pretty much is like, well, I'm gonna either kill you or you're gonna help me out. And I think somehow the DM says, well, look, you can't fight him, so we're looking to just bail. And he reaches out his hand, and he places it on Dave's shoulder. And we're not at drawing swords yet, so we're a little trepidatious. And he's like, I really think you should help me out and do as I suggest. You wouldn't like the repercussions. And as he finishes, it's like, Dave, drop a will save. So Dave fails his save. He's like, all right, you've been geezed, and you now have to go on this quest or die. So Dave, turns around and is like, yeah, guys, I think that might be a good idea to help this guy out. Well, we've been traveling together for a while, so we don't want to just, leave him to the wolves. So, okay, let's go and help him out. So he goes on about this grand quest about, finding this powerful, orb for this wizard character. And we set off on this grand adventure. And we travel, and we adventure, and we get this thing, and we bring it back. Now, the exact details of the handoff, I look at, and somehow the DM makes it so that before we can give the orb to this character, thus finishing the quest and ending the geese, he pulls Dave aside and says, look, you've done a good hand for me, blah, 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 and he hits him with another geese. But because he's already under the effect of the first one, he's not even allowed a saving throw. So we already had the conversation coming back to this, creature's base, that our plan was to drop it and run. Not talk to him, not do anything, because we wanted to go back to our stronghold. Again, we wanted to go back to our plans. We wanted to do what we wanted. We were giving the DM enough fuel of another type of adventure. But he's got this, story that he's already written, and he needs it done, for whatever reason. So, boom, he hits him with a geese. He's got to go get this second orb, which, we think it's supposed to be some, pair of eyes that is some grand artifact they've collected together and whatever else. We did a little bit of research and whatever. But, whatever. So, we give him the first orb, and Dave's like, yeah, we got to go get the second one now. We all sigh. And, we go off. And, we travel for, days and weeks, and I think like a month or so, trying to go find this, dark, gnomish stronghold, underground, and, utterly crazy. So we fight through, tons of obstacles, gaining, loads of power. I think at this point in time, we're getting close to, 11th, 12th, 13th level. Doing all kinds of, crazy stuff. And we get to, this gnomish city. And we fight a little here, and we sneak a little here, and we get to the temple where we're told it is. And we get up to this front door. And, what do we see? We can look through, and we can see the orb. And Dave's like, all right, we can get this, and we can get this over with. And he steps up to, the main archway, and, this big glow and symbol appears on the ground, and, boom, Dave's got to make another save. And wouldn't you know, it's a save versus death. This is a symbol of death, and Dave's character just slumps. And, we've got some magic in the group, and we look at it, it's like, okay, this was a really mighty spell, but it's a one-use thing. So we're like, all right, and we step up to Dave's character, and again, this is now, the whole party's right there at the front of this temple. We look through the door, 100 yards away. Well, it's probably guarded, but we don't see any guards, but there's the orb. If we had a magic user with some kind of telekinesis or some shit like that, we could have probably just summoned it to us and run. But you know what? Our characters made a choice right then and there. We really have no desire to do this quest. We've been out of game. We've been forced down this road. In game, we've been forced down this road. So we grab Dave's character. We got some mighty strength in my barbarian arms, and we just pick him up and we sneak off to an alleyway. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm a 7th level druid at this point in time. I've got some mighty magic spells, and sure enough, I got reincarnation. And it requires a little bit of preparation, but boom, I drop it on this not quite a human, not quite orc's corpse. And we dropped that percentile dice. And, sure enough, this character, who was totally a mobile fighter, he was all about speed, he was all about running, he didn't try to engage in combat the way, you normally would. He fought with a spear, and he shot in and shot out, all move by attack and whatever else. So, we dropped the dice, and sure enough, this fucker comes back as the centaur. He couldn't have asked for a better resurrection roll for his, character build choice. But, we get back to the in-game part, and it's like, all right, Core, that's the dude's name. How you feeling? And he's a little, the fuck, I got 4 legs. And it's like, well, the orb's just a few hundred yards away. He's like, forget that. I don't need that anymore. We're like, all right, we're good, we're done. Yeah, as a druid, I've researched my spells, and there's a spell, I think it was called like Flock of Birds or Flight of Birds, something along those lines, that allows you to not only transform yourself, because I can shapeshift, so I don't really need that power, but I can transform the party into a flight of birds, and you get some ridiculous movement rate. The spell lasts like 8 hours. It is a perfect, party travel spell. and we look at how long it'll take for us to just get out of Dodge, get out of the underground, get to the surface and fly back to our stronghold, and we say, okay, well, we've traveled for this long, this is that, it's going to take us 14 days if I just cast this spell twice a day. And the DM is so blown away at our willingness to just up and leave the quest that he's not able to put anything in front of us. He doesn't give us any encounters. He doesn't do any hard press thing. So we honestly, we still tell the story that we beat the DM. We got past his NPC, and we willingly chose to retire these characters and end this campaign rather than do his scripted material. We loved these characters. He's one of my favorite characters that I have played over the years. I spent a load of time, drawing up magic items and different things that I'd like him to have. I've had artist friends try to script this armor that I wanted to make for him out of this crazy monstrous beast that we killed, because he was a druid. He wanted to wear like natural armors and that kind of stuff. So if we're willing to retire the characters ourselves rather than go on with scripted material, what does that have to say? So to you DMs out there that have this kind of mentality, just sit back and look into it and say, look, I gotta allow some leeway. I gotta give my players some choice in this matter. And if your players are out of game, letting you know that this is things that you want to do with the character, that's the perfect place for you to take your material. Because then as you're doing this, you're bringing that character into your story and really making them feel that they're a part of this world, rather than pulling out this scripted material that you wrote, or this module that you wrote, that they can't go off book, that they can't make any deviations. At that point in time, you might as well just pull out a cool movie and watch it, because you've got just as much say. So, to you guys out there, keep rocking on, keep doing what you're doing. To those of you who, really aren't into gaming and not really, checking it out, give it a shot. Check out a LARP, check out, a tabletop. Heck, find your local, gaming, business, and say, hey, look, can I just sit in and see what it's like? I've never had an experience before. And you might find out that, like myself, that you love it, and that, you're now hooked. So, thanks, guys. You have a great one.